Hi, I'm Dr. George Yancey. Let's share some paradigms. Paradigm share today concerns Christian mistreatment. It's interesting because I have studied Christianophobia and I have studied anti-Christian bigotry. And so sometimes when I bring that up, there are people, and some of them are Christians, who say, wait, can Christians actually face discrimination? Or do they face discrimination? Isn't that the wham-ambulance? Christians just crying out. And often when I dig down deeper, what I find is an attitude that Christians really can't be mistreated. Now, to be honest, think about Christians in the United States. I'm pretty sure that if we talk about Christians in places worldwide where there's very overt persecution, they would not have this attitude. Their attitude is something like this. In the United States, Christians are so powerful and so strong, and they're the numerical majority, that they don't face discrimination. So anytime they're complaining, what they're doing is trying to gain power through their complaints. Ironically, a lot of the groups that they would say face mistreatment have faced the same criticism. There are those who say African Americans to complain in order to gain power. So this is not a new critique, per se. But this attitude that Christians cannot face mistreatment that I sometimes find problematic. So let's look at that. Research I've done indicated systematically certain facts. There's a certain percentage of people in the United States who have a hostility towards Christians. And I have reason to believe that this percentage is higher than the percentage of hostility towards Muslims. Now, that by itself does not equal mistreatment, but that's just a reality. So in academia, I found that academics are more likely to be unwilling to hire someone who's considered a Christian than to hire someone who's considered a Republican, than to hire someone who's an atheist, than to hire someone who's in the LGBTQ community. It goes on and on and on. So we have a situation where a good percentage of people don't like Christians, and at least in one category, there are people who have stated that they're less willing to hire you if they find out you're considered a Christian. And then there's this reality. Research has shown that individuals who are socially conservative, now they don't measure religion, but social conservatives tend to be Christians, that if they go into academia, they're more likely to get lower tier jobs, even controlling for their productivity. So that if they publish 5 articles, the sort of job they're in is going to be lower than someone who is not a social conservative publishing 5 articles. So now we have systematic evidence that Christians are being treated in a way that's below how others are being treated. Let me just say that this by itself, if I produce this evidence concerning Jews or Muslims or Hispanics or lesbians, no one would argue that there are not times in which these groups are being mistreated. The fact that I can produce this evidence for Christians and people still argue about it says that there's still this notion Christians can't be mistreated. And I fear what is behind this notion is that even if we treat Christians wrongly, it's kind of okay because of the majority group. If you enjoy this content, please give me a like. If you like these sort of topics, I have a playlist on Christianophobia. You may want to like that playlist. You may want to subscribe to this channel. This is a way in which you can support this channel and help build it and get ideas like this out here. Now, I want to get back because I want to personalize this. It's one thing to talk about data and studies and information. And while that's convincing to me, I realize not everyone's in academia, and that's fine. So sometimes anecdotes are just anecdotes, and you can find an anecdote for anything, and it doesn't mean anything systematically. I let off with the systematic stuff because I want to know that this is not just about a bunch of anecdotes, but there are a couple of examples just to show what Christian mistreatment can look like. The first one is a case study by a man by the name of Eric Walsh. Eric Walsh is a lay pastor who's also a doctor who applied and received a job in Georgia. He was living in, I believe, California, Southern California at the time. Applied for a job in the upper levels of the Georgia government that concerns his medical expertise. As a lay pastor, he preached a sermon against homosexuality. He had been hired. Okay, I want to stipulate, this is not, did this affect him being hired? He had been hired. Some of the people discovered his sermon in his church. He's not an activist. He was not going around preaching on the street corners or anything like that. They pressured him, and he was fired from the job he'd just been hired from. No, a sermon in his own church led him being fired. This, I would argue, is Christianophobia. He lost the job. Now, he sued and won, and I'm glad he sued and won. However, are you saying that that's a fair thing to do? Is that not Christianophobia? Let me go to a more tragic case. A man by the name of Mike Adams. Now remember, research shows that in academia that there's evidence of Christianophobia. He was a criminal justice professor who had received tenure, but he also was a very outspoken Christian. He wrote some controversial comments in Christian outlets and some conservative outlets. He also had done the publications, the academic publications that showed that he deserved tenure. The university kept pressuring him, trying to get rid of him. They lost a lawsuit doing this. They kept pressuring him. And eventually, they found some way to force him out. And the pressure was so strong that eventually he committed suicide. Now, when someone chooses to commit suicide, that's ultimately their decision. And yet, when LGBTQ people commit suicide, Christians are blamed for not having accepted that. Why should not the university take blame for Adam's suicide under those circumstances? Even if you don't want the university to take blame for that, is this not Christianophobia? Once again, the anecdotes don't prove that's widespread. There's other evidence that proves that it's widespread. But the anecdotes show what can happen with Christianophobia when it goes unchecked. Yes, Christianophobia is real. How widespread it is, who knows? But it is an issue we should deal with. I'm not here arguing that Christians are the most persecuted. In fact, I don't like the term persecution. But I do argue that in some situations, Christians work at more of a disadvantage than a lot of other groups. I myself have faced more prejudice in academia as a Christian than as an African American. And for me, it's not even close. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. And if you do, please come back. We can shatter some more paradigms.